Let's start with the question. Where does Breath of the Wild take place in the Zelda timeline? Do we know? With clues in the game. Where Breath of the Wild happens in the Zelda timeline. Are there at least clues to find out if we are in the fallen hero, Zelda or Link timeline? So how can we solve this? There are 5 possible answers. Answer 1. Short version: the timeline in which the story takes place as you see fit. Based on the other answers. Many people have different interpretations on which timeline Breath of the Wild takes place. Long version: a new article from IGN contains information from an interview with the director of Breath of the Wild. Stated in this interview, the timeline is which this story takes place is based on the player's own imagination and how they interpret it. In an interview with Famitsu. Translated by Siliconera. Breath of the Wild director Hidemaru Fujibayashi says exactly which timeline it rounds out is up to the player's imagination. The current answer was right to say how it contains elements from the other timelines. This made it is unclear exactly where and which timeline Breath of the Wild fits into. Based on the article, the Japanese website of Nintendo's Zelda Timeline has been updated to contain Breath of the Wild. Oddly enough, Breath of the Wild is at the end and is disconnected from the other timelines. The reason for this is because the history of Hyrule in this story went through many revisions, including elements that either fit perfectly or warranted a change. Hyrule's history changes with time, explained series producer Eiji Aonuma. When we think of the next game and what we want to do with it, we might think, oh, this'll fit well, and place it neatly into the timeline. But sometimes we think, oh crap, and have to change the placement. Actually, the decided history has been tweaked many times. Answer 2. I believe it might be the Fallen Hero timeline because the Master Sword is placed in the Lost Woods. And it only shows Ganon in the game. It can't be the Child timeline because the Master Sword is placed in the ruins of the Temple of Time. It can't be Adult timeline either because it's not in New Hyrule. Ganondorf was stoned by the Master Sword underwater. Answer 3. Warning. Minor spoilers, based on an IGN article. Timeline. BOTW. I believe Breath of the Wild takes place on the Wind Waker timeline. Sometime after Wind Waker. I have 2 theories about when it could be. Less likely. BOTW takes place after Spirit Tracks. When Ganon manages to find a way to New Hyrule. And due to a long time being on the new continent, everyone forgets it's New Hyrule and therefore just calls it Hyrule. More likely, it is in the Downfall timeline and there is another split in the timeline. At the end of Wind Waker, Link and Tetra, Zelda go sailing off into the sunset. BOTW, however, is what would happen if Link fails. This leads to Ganon rising again and uncovering Hyrule from the water. It turns out that the Link and Master Sword in Wind Waker were imposters, fakes. And really the Master Sword has been at the bottom of Hyrule the whole time. My main proof for this is that at the beginning of Wind Waker it says it has been 100 years and there has been no hero. As Link from Oot had disappeared. At the beginning of BOTW, the mysterious voice tells Link that he's been asleep for 100 years. Obviously, it must be the actual Link from Oot, one of Zelda's descendants, and revived Ganon, without Wind Waker really ever happening. In the official Hyrule Historia timeline, this would sort of make a branch after Wind Waker as another the hero is defeated. Edit. Link in BOTW would have to be the son of Link from Oot from Malon. This is due to Mipha mentioning how they grew up together. As this Link must have traveled all over Hyrule after Oot with his father. Zelda in Bo TW says, "Your path seems to mirror your father's, as in to protect the current princess." Notice how most of the divine beasts are named after sages from Oot. This was probably the hero of time, this Link's father's idea. Answer 4. It's now 2021. And from what I can tell while researching the games of the series in order to write a little fan fiction, I've come to the conclusion that Breath of the Wild takes place far in the future. 10,100 years before Bot W. Ganon got his butt kicked by all of Hyrule. Although the layout of the Bot W map looks a lot like New Hyrule, except the water in the lower left corner of the map has become a desert. Yet there was still quite a gap from the age of, say, Spirit Tracks up to the point where the Guardians were built and such. Also, Old Hyrule Easter eggs keep showing up in Botu's map. So it could be Old Hyrule or New Hyrule, as the Gerudo Desert has a whale skeleton in it, proving it once held water. But there are whale skeletons in the mountains and in Elden region, suggesting Wind Waker happened for a while. It takes place so far in the future that Bot W is canon. And all the old games are the legends of the Zelda universe. And there are things in Bot W that pull from all three timelines, as if to suggest that each timeline is kind of like a fork in Abrahamic religion. 2. Use it figuratively. Where some believers went the Christian route, some believers stayed the course of Judaism, and some people went with a prophet's ideas and became Muslim. My point is just the way the timeline splits. So to do the beliefs of how things happened over 1,000 years before Hyrule's technologically advanced defeat of Ganon 10,100 years ago. And the game has issues that prove this, that, and the other occurred from each of the three timelines, leaving the modern Hyrule denizens to question what they want to believe, and the player as well. Basically, no one knows what really happened so far in the past. Only that these legends of Zelda splintered and then merged back together at some point. However, I'd also like to point out that Bot W takes place in North America approximately 15,000 years in the future. Gerudo Desert is New Mexico, which filled with water after the glaciers and polar ice caps fully melted for a while. And then the world was covered with water, and reflected the sun's rays back, leading to things getting cold again. And the caps and glaciers came back, and the water receded. Lanairu Mountain is somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains. Hebra is the Rockies. Florida is still fully submerged. The Mississippi River flows up from the Farron Sea, the Gulf of Mexico, and into Lake Hillier, which is north of Biloxi. This puts Hyrule Castle somewhere around Nashville. Death Mountain is the supervolcano that was theorized to be beneath Boston back from 2011 to 2017. And then in 2018, it was decided it was just a lava pit in the mantle beneath Boston, so now that element of the game is just whoops. Ask an ornithologist to listen to the birds in Bot W. Every bird is in North America. From the whippoorwill to the goose, every single bird is from North America. Every single one. And ornithologists have examined the game at length. There's quite a lot recorded birds in that game, and they're all North American birds. So, did California get submerged or fall into the sea? Nah. Maybe it's Galatia, and modern Hyrule people do not cross the Rockies or the desert. Who knows? But the eastern seaboard stops at the Appalachian Mountains. And Florida and anything east of the mountains are submerged. Post-global climate change. Now, in my fan fiction, Earth as we live in was in the Sacred Land. And Hyrule is a mirror universe where the goddesses were tech used in a tri-stage terraforming procedure. And the people of Hylia were genetically engineered creations of a brilliant woman, Hylia, who was one of those world-changing brilliant people. She could engineer the genome to create races. She could smith a sword. She could edit her own genome to remove her own immortality in order to be reborn via nanites, carried in the blood of the royal family, born of Hylia's bloodline. The nanites stay in the royal family. But only the women really learn how to interface with them, leading them to have what looks like powers to those who don't understand ancient tech. Meanwhile, some of Hylia's other creations, the Ooko, the Zora, the Gorons, the Sheikah, the Minish, etc., continue to evolve. Before long, we have the Gerudo. We have fairies, possibly come from the Minish. We have the Ruto, possibly come Zora, possibly from Loftwings and Ooko. Who knows? And when Ganon touched that tech known as the Triforce, Miyamoto once said they were intended to be computer chips. After all, it terraformed the sacred realm into the dark world. And he brought moblins and so forth from that realm to the light world realm. But, as I said earlier, at this point, Nintendo is just placing the game series so far in the future. Everything from past games are just the legends of Legend of Zelda, while Bot W is modern canon, so to speak. Thoughts? Answer 5. Maybe it's some time after the era of decline, where the hero rises and defeats Ganon once and for all. I hope these answers helped, and if they did, please drop a comment and subscribe.